Yo, I'm KallaTheYapper, and I'm back with another reaction. Today, I'm going to react to this video made by the Nigerian Perspective. This is another one of their videos, and this is about Avidius versus Dainsleif, how a 3-month story outshines a 5-star legend. I'm gonna say this right now before we even get into it. I already know what he's talking about because I know he made a community post about this. This video was 2 weeks ago, mind you, but I disagree with the claim that Dainsleif's character and his story is poor in comparison to Avidius. And that's because Avidius' character is not an in-game character. It's a character that's meant to be here, now, finish. Right? Dainsleif, he is in-game. We know this. We've known this for years. He's meant to be in-game. We are not nowhere near time for him and his story to be concluded.
It's one of the greatest stories in Wooden Ways. Maybe even one of the greatest stories in the entirety of Gacha.
That's a fucking lie. I made a whole video about, I reacted to a video explaining why the 2.7 story fell the fuck off. And why it was not the greatest Gacha story ever told. Any nigga, still pushing that 2 weeks after the fact, you're lying to yourself. We all know the Woopa 2.7 story, it had good spectacle, but the emotional weight was fucking hollow than a motherfucker. Anyway.
And in just a couple of days, we're heading into one of the greatest stories in Genshin Impact. And the beauty of this situation is that both stories feature some of the most interesting characters that both games have to offer. But in this video, we're interested in specific characters from both stories. Characters who, in my opinion, have done a great job in pushing the story forward and making it memorable. And we'll be seeing how they compare against each other. Now, upon playing the story of Wooden Ways, we're introduced to so many characters, all with interesting lore, all fascinating to explore. But Septimon's story gave us Avidius, who absolutely kills it when it comes to interest and memorability. And within Genshin Impact, a character that stands out from really any other in the game is Dainsleif, one of the most interesting and important characters in the entirety of Genshin Impact. And we're going to take these two characters and see who is depicted better, who is written better, who is more nuanced, and ultimately, who is more interesting between the two. So if
the answer is, for every last question, is they're both interesting. They both have depth. They're both delved into and fleshed out. So if we're going to have to make this argument or this idea that Dainsleif hasn't been fleshed out as a character in comparison to Avidius, then I'm going to say that's a lie before we even get there. But anyway, let's continue.
So if you're into this kind of content, make sure to like the video and let me know what you think about both of these characters. What do you think of Avidius? What do you think of Dainsleif? Who do you find more interesting? Who do you resonate with more?
I find Dainsleif more interesting personally, especially knowing that Dainsleif's lore connects to the overall lore of Genshin Impact story as a whole and its world building. That's why I find Dainsleif more interesting. Avidius, he's cool for the here and now, and that's it.
Characters. What do you think of Avidius? What do you think of Dainsleif? Who do you find more interesting? Who do you resonate with more? Tell me all that and more in the comments below, and of course don't forget to subscribe in case you're notified on any of my future videos. Before we get into it, this video is sponsored by U7Buy.
I don't care what your sponsorship is.
For all things Gacha. Discount code TNP to save an extra 3% on already low prices. U7Buy.
Also, isn't this the same sponsorship that those AI channels push as well?
Gateway to the best gaming top-up deals, fast delivery, and unbeatable prices. So thank you,
Well, this must be Temu.
for sponsoring this video, and
Whatever.
now let's get into it. Now, the topic of interest between these two characters is very fascinating, especially considering the fact that Dainsleif and Avidius are two extremely different characters. Unlike something like Augusta and Mavuika, who had extremely similar roles, whether in terms of position, title, or actual role they played in their respective stories, Dainsleif and Avidius share nothing like that. So even though we're going to delve into their individual stories in this analysis, the kind of interest we're focusing on in this video is how interesting they are to us, the players. What is
The answer is easy. They're interesting for their own specific reason. Dainsleif, again, is interesting because he's meant to be in the game. He's meant to, honestly, be probably one of the last characters we ever fight against when we get to the end of the story for Genshin Impact. As stated, even in the Teyvat teaser trailer, where they showed us the entire story, what region we're going to go to, one after the other, and then at the end of it, what does Dainsleif say? Oh, you've gone through this world, this, that, and the third. Now, challenge me, command me to step aside, prove to me that you're worthier than I to rescue her. That's exactly what he says. So he's meant to be in-game versus Avidius. He's meant to be for the here and now. Again, I said that earlier.
What has each individual game done to make both characters interesting? What has each game done to make them stand out, to make them more memorable? And ultimately, which game has done a better job by creating this sense of interest and memorability in both characters? So let's start with Dainsleif.
If he's about to make the argument that Genshin has failed to do this for Dainsleif, I already can see how he's going to be lying like a motherfucker making that claim. But I'll see what argument he makes to make it try to make sense. Let's continue.
Now, it is no surprise to anyone that Dainsleif is one of the most interesting characters in Genshin Impact. You see, right now in Nordcry, we can clearly see that there is a convergence happening in the story, a point where everyone's journey is starting to connect. But in the regions before Nordcry, we know that the story was never really like that. It was mostly split into two major paths: the Archon quest and the Dainsleif quest. The Archon quest were mainly about traveling from nation to nation, getting involved in the struggle of each land, solving their problems, meeting their gods, the Archons who rule them. But the Dainsleif quest were something else entirely, because depending on who you ask, they were actually the more important quest.
No, I'm gonna say that right now. For niggas still pushing that, that's bullshit. First and foremost, us engaging the traveler, traveling from nation to nation to try to find their sibling, and helping these people solve their crisis, to save them, to help keep them safe and protected from whatever threat is happening in their nation. It is a necessity for the traveler. The reason being is that the traveler is going to be the person who sits on the seat of God once we get to the end of the story. So before they can do that, they need to truly understand this world and the people in it before they get to that position. They must truly understand the truth of this world. That's the whole point of this journey. Not only is it to find our sibling, but the other point, which is, again, they need to truly understand this world and the people in it. That's why the traveler, which makes them different from their sibling, the traveler is more willing to protect the people of Teyvat versus the sibling, the Abyss sibling, who does not care about the people of Teyvat that she'll hurt getting the job done. She does not care for them. The only people she cares for are the people of Khaenri'ah, nobody else. That's what already puts them in their separate lines between each other. And on top of that, the Dainsleif quest, it just helps us explore more about Dainsleif as a character and the information about Khaenri'ah, the 5 sinners, and whatever personal relationships Dainsleif had, either with his subordinates or with the Abyss sibling.
They didn't just tell a story about the world, they told our story, the story of the traveler, the journey of trying to find our siblings, which at the time was the core focus of our journey. And if you needed any proof of how important these quests were the quests that officially made it canon that our names were either Aether or Lumine, depending on who you chose at the start of the game. And at the heart of every single one of these moments was Dainsleif. He was the center of these quests, the driver of these quests. And for the better part of 5 years, we've gotten numerous Dainsleif quests, each one exploring Dainsleif as a character, each one peeling back another layer, revealing more about him, and giving us deeper insights into some of the most important aspects of Genshin Impact's story.
So I would love to know, how exactly does Avidius outshine his character then? Because they both get that treatment. Granted, I still argue that Avidius is not as interesting as Dainsleif, and I think the better comparison between Avidius, or to compare Avidius with, should have been with Phainon from Honkai Star Rail, my bad. That's what I meant to say, Honkai Star Rail. Phainon from Honkai Star Rail has a more direct comparison to Avidius, seeing as they're both quote-unquote fake individuals who are only manifestations of this simulation created by this individual who wants to achieve this goal of XYZ for their villainous purpose.
Now, when you compare this to Avidius, the contrast becomes clear. Because when we talk about Avidius, you realize that he's not nearly as important to the story of Wooden Ways as Dainsleif is to Genshin Impact. Dainsleif has been a recurring presence throughout the story for the better part of 5 years, ever since the beginning of Genshin Impact all the way back to our journey in Mondstadt. But Avidius, on the other hand, was a character introduced only in Septimont. His entire arc lasted barely 3 months. And unlike Dainsleif, Avidius wasn't a key figure tied deeply to the lore of Wooden Waves. Avidius was a very story-specific character. His his entire arc existed within the context of the Septimon storyline. So objectively, Dainsleif should be the more interesting character, right? I mean, say what you will about Genshin Impact. We've established numerous times on this channel that while Genshin storytelling leaves a lot to be desired, Genshin's story itself is absolutely phenomenal. And Dainsleif is one of those characters who stands right at the forefront of that story. Combine that with the fact that Dainsleif has been a part of this narrative since the very beginning, for the better part of 5 years. And it should be a no-brainer that Dainsleif must be the more interesting character. But here's where things get strange. If I were to ask you, regardless of which side you support, whether you're a Genshin Impact fan or a Wooden Waves fan, if I asked you who the more interesting character is between Dainsleif and Avidius, I don't think a lot of people would say Dainsleif. In fact, I think a lot of you would hesitate. A lot of thoughts would go through your mind before you could even answer what should have been an easy question. So the big question is, why? Why should I even...
I'm going to sit here and explain why. Because the reason he put in this section in is because he did a community post 2 weeks ago before he made this video about who's more interesting to y'all, Avidius or Dainsleif. Mind you, the majority of his audience currently right now are Wuwa dominated, right? Or anti-Hoyo dominated, right? So, of course, naturally, they chose Avidius over Dainsleif. Because again, Dainsleif, he was a character who appeared in the story once every year. Now, it seems with Nodcry, Dainsleif will be appearing more often, especially in Nodcry's story. So, of course, people are going to be like, well, since we only meet him once a year with specific quests that come out later on, of course, there's a gap in time between each time we meet him. So, of course, our interest for him goes up every time he appears, but after he disappears, our interest for him goes down. So, of course, Avidius having his cool moment here and now, it feels like it's better than Dainsleif's. That's naturally how people's response will be. But again, let's be for real, Dainsleif is still the more interesting character. Or rather, they're both still interesting, but Dainsleif is clearly more interesting, obviously. So...
get strange. If I were to ask you, regardless of which side you support, whether you're a Genshin Impact fan or a Wooden Waves fan, if I asked you who the more interesting character is between Dainsleif and Avidius, I don't think a lot of people would say Dainsleif. In fact, I think a lot of you would hesitate.
A lot of people, mind you, are people who quit playing Genshin Impact, so they don't know much more information about Dainsleif. And again, those same a lot of people are, again, anti-Hoyo as well, because they despise Hoyoverse and treat Hoyoverse like the devil, while treating Kuro Games as their new god that they suck the dick of, while simultaneously letting that company get away with doing scummy business practice that they criticize Hoyoverse for doing. My bad, I just need to state that because people seem to forget that shit.
Hesitate. A lot of thoughts would go through your mind before you could even answer what should have been an easy question. So the big question is, why? Why should there even be a debate between a character like Dainsleif and another like Avidius?
Why it should be a debate? Because Wuthering Waves players can't do nothing else making content about their game other than to keep comparing it to Genshin Impact, which again, they shine in a lot of aspects that Genshin Impact doesn't shine in, but they got to keep bringing back Genshin Impact as if these new games like, let's say Anata, Dual Knight Abyss, and so on aren't about to be out here smoking the fuck out of their game if their game don't get their shit together. Anyway.
When one of them has every single advantage that the other never had. And I believe that the main reason behind this entire dilemma is a single word: representation. See, a couple of weeks back, I made a video diving deep into the nuances of the Wooden Waves NPCs, really going into everything that...
I'm gonna be honest, you lacked some things to mention in your video that I pointed out. Go check out my reaction, I did it to his video.
Make these characters stand out from every other NPC in the entirety of Gacha. But one thing I did not talk about in that video was how well Wooden Waves handled the idea of representation. Cause you see, Gacha games, unlike most other games, don't just tell one story. They tell a wide array of different stories, and within those stories, you have a wide range of concepts, ideas, and factions, all existing side by side. The problem though is that it is nearly impossible to explore all of these in full detail. There is simply not enough time for these games to tell every story they set up. So to solve that problem, Gacha games do something incredibly smart. Instead of putting those ideas or factions to the side, instead of completely forgetting about them, they assign characters to represent them. And through these characters, we're able to gain a deep understanding of the concepts, the ideologies, and the factions that they embody. Take the Knights of Favonius in Genshin Impact, for example. The reality is, we'll probably never get into the fine details or know the exact inner workings of the Knights of Favonius, but through the characters who represent them, Jin, Kaya, Lisa, and Albedo, we already have a clear understanding of who these knights are. We know what they stand for, we know what they believe in, we know what they fight for, the ideals, the value, and the beliefs that define them. The same can be said about the Order of the Deep in Wooden Waves. Now that we've reached the end of Recency, we know for a fact that we will likely never get a story that gives us Phoebe, Khaenri'ah. I feel like there's only two characters that can truly represent the Order of the Deep. direct, detailed insights into the Order itself. But even then, we already have a clear understanding of what the Order of the Deep is, and that is because of the characters who represent it. Khaenri'ah, who embodies the darker, more twisted side of the Order, and Phoebe, who represents the good, the pure, and the hopeful side of it. And
this is true, but again, I would say this: Phoebe's personal story, or just like anything tied to the Order when it came down to the main story, wasn't really touched on. If I'm being honest, we really only saw the shady dark side of the Order in the main story quest for Recency when it came to the Order as a faction. We never really saw the other side of that through Phoebe. We only just saw Phoebe. We didn't really dive deep into the other side of the Order, where we have individuals who don't really agree with how Khaenri'ah is doing things or whatever, and they're like their own sub-faction in it, or they recognize that this is a problem, but they don't say anything about it, right? We don't really get to see that. The only character that represents that solo dolo is Phoebe, but there should be more characters that should represent that as well, and not just her.
And through them, we understand.
But again, the story does not give itself time to focus on that when it comes to Phoebe. It doesn't do that. Phoebe comes in and comes out. That's it. We just learned the darker side of the Order and nothing else.
That there is duality shaping the Order. That these two characters don't just represent the faction itself, but also the balance and conflict within it. And these kinds of representations of
you can't really say balance and conflict within it when the other side of that dime, the light side of it, was never really shown or explored in depth, mind you, in comparison to the dark side of it that we got to see in depth.
Of concepts, of philosophies can be seen throughout both games, both Genshin Impact and Wooden Waves. But most importantly, the same kind of representation can also be seen in both Avidius and Dainsleif. In the story that Avidius was involved in, he didn't just represent a faction, he represented something much deeper and something far more important, especially within the story of Septimus. He represented the idea of defying fate. Fate being one of the core concepts that the entire story of Septimus revolves around. And let me tell you, Wooden Waves did a phenomenal.
And I'm gonna be honest, I must be honest right here. The whole defying fate thing, it felt like they dropped the ball on the concept or just the action in itself. Because it's like, what exactly was the dark fate that they were fighting against? Because as far as I remember, there was no prophecy saying that darkness would befall Septima and Recency, or just the entirety of Recency, and it would be the end of Recency as a nation. Like how Fontaine had the prophecy about the Great Flood and how people would be, you know, consumed and devolved into the waters, so that they'll be able to pay for their sins, and the Hydra Archon will be weeping on the throne alone. We didn't have anything like that. So for me, the whole point of the whole defying fate thing, it fell off base for what the story they were trying to tell.
Phenomenal job in depicting Avidius, especially when it came to what he represented. Because not only did Wooden Waves give us an entertaining experience through his story, they give us a human experience.
If I'm being honest, it feels like there's only two or three moments within Renesita's entire story where there was like, oh, the whole defying fate thing, which was one, the prophecy about this hero, the hero of heroes that's supposed to arrive in Septima. So there's that. Then Avidius defying, quote unquote, defying his fate when it came down to him being a creation of Cristoforo, who deliberately designed him to have a tragic fate. And then finally, and her defying fate, or rather the rover helping her defy fate so that she can come back and be alive and not be this thing that was erased from existence. So there's only 3 moments of defying fate, but the entire plot of Recency didn't feel like, oh, we were trying to defy fate because some prophecy was put down. Like, no, it was just like shit was just happening, right? It didn't feel like we were trying to defy some fate at all. It's not until the end where they started pushing that of, oh, we're trying to defy fate. But like, are we really? Maybe I'm missing something. Someone who plays Wuthering Waves, who watches my content, or who's a part of my audience, y'all tell me if I'm off base with what I'm saying. And even go in depth if you need to. But please, if you're going to write a comment, please just keep it to one comment and just keep replying back to your own comment so that I'll be able to read all that. Anyway, let's continue.
They give us something that felt raw, emotional, and deeply personal. Through Avidius, we see the reaction of someone who was essentially betrayed by fate. Someone who believed he was born in glory, destined for greatness. Someone who believed that every achievement he had earned was his own, but in reality, he was quite literally born from evil. He was created by Khaenri'ah, one of the major antagonists of Wooden Waves, and it was made from the frequency of a mad king who had surrendered himself completely to darkness. And when that truth came to light, when Avidius realized that everything that he had accomplished was built on lies kept into the heads of everyone around him, we saw something rare. We saw raw human emotion, the existential dread that comes from that revelation, the pain, the guilt, the self-hatred. But also through Avidius, we saw someone who refused to break, someone who decided to keep pushing forward, someone.
Yeah, but I will have to, let me add this point because he's not going to mention this. When Avidius met the Rover again, they completely stripped his anger from him that he felt in the 2.6 story after we completed the 2.6 story, because Avidius just disappears and leaves, right? Mind you, the last interaction we had with Avidius was that he was angry and upset after he found out the truth about himself. But next, when we meet him again, he's all like, welcome, great one. I'm so glad to see that you're here to help me, this and the third, right? There was no conversation with him. There was no scene with him that would transition us from his rage to his acceptance of what he is and him going to like get the job done, even though he's not real, even though he's fake, even though he's not a real individual, right? There was no transition between that. So that was extremely jarring when it came down to his character and his how he moved moving forward, because there was no thing that connected the previous action to where he is now. There was no connection.
Someone who chose to defy the fate that was handed to him. Knowing he was born from evil, he chose to do good. Knowing he came from darkness, he chose to seek light. And even in his death, even in his final moments, he died doing good. He died trying to be remembered as someone who lived his life with meaning, as someone who spent every last breath fighting to do what was right. And when you play through Avidius' story, it is no surprise why people have such a raw emotional reaction to him.
And also, we need to admit this as well. There's recency bias. That's a thing. So that plays a role in why people would choose Avidius over Dainsleif, because again, Dainsleif is not a character that constantly always is there 24/7 in every part of the Archon quest. No, he appeared, especially over the last 5 years, once every year with only one quest every time, until recently now with Nodcry, where he is now present here in Nodcry after the 6.1 story. So we will be seeing more of him, especially if he helps us with whatever crisis happens next, which more than likely he will, since we're dealing with one of the 5 sinners that he has personal beef with.
Because Avidius isn't just a side character. He's not someone who exists just to hype the protagonist or move the story forward. No, Avidius' story is a story, a complete story on its own. A story that could stand apart from the main narrative and still be told beautifully, powerfully, and entirely. And when you experience that story for yourself, it is nothing short of phenomenal. But with Dainsleif, it's a different case, because just like Avidius, there are also things that Dainsleif represents. He represents everything surrounding Khaenri'ah, which, as we know, is one of the most interesting and one of the darkest stories in all of Genshin Impact. And understanding that, you would think that through Dainsleif, you would come to understand that pain, that sorrow, that madness. You would believe that through Dainsleif, we would feel the weight of all the tragedy that befell Khaenri'ah. You would believe that this understanding would make him a much more nuanced character, a much more relatable character, and a much more human character.
First of all, we're never going to relate to him because, mind you, let's be for real, most of us who live in the modern day, we will never truly experience how it feels to watch your nation fall and crumble to dust, or know how, like, the only closest thing that we would be able to connect with Dainsleif realistically is how it feels to be betrayed by people you thought you could trust. That's the only true human emotional connection that you could have to Dainsleif, because you have to go through that to actually experience it, and that's something realistic that people go through. Again, also, we need to say this as well. With the 6.1 story of Genshin that just happened with Nodcry, this is one of the reasons why I didn't want to react to this video immediately, because I was going to have pushback against it, because I wanted to play through the quest first before I reacted to this video. And I played through it. And after seeing the actions of Recency, and not just Recency, but the rest of the 5 sinners. Of course, we didn't really dive deep into the actions of the other 5 sinners, but seeing how Dainsleif was the last one standing, and how the 5 sinners went about just ignoring him, whispering to the voices of the abyss and succumbing to it. And then he's like, bro, I can't believe y'all betrayed me. Are you serious? I did all this. I went against the Venster King to save my brother because he had cut his eyes out. Because the Venster King had my brother's eyes cut out and had imprisoned him in the worst conditions possible. There was no reason for this action. The king has truly gone mad. We've been seeing it piece by piece as time has gone on, but now we truly have to stop this. This nigga Dainsleif went against his king. He went against even fellow soldiers that he knew personally to try to do this, and then end up betrayed by the people he thought he could trust, that he rallied together to help him. Mind you, again, this is depicted in the 6.1 story for Nograi.
This understanding would make him a much more nuanced character, a much more relatable character. And
then, I'm going to say this as well, because he's not going to mention it, because at the time, Nogri's 6.1 story wasn't out yet. But Dainsleif, when it came to us fighting Re'rir, Dainsleif was conflicted about it. He wasn't conflicted out of nowhere just because for the sake of it. He was conflicted because he had now got a full picture of what happened to Re'rir, for why it is that Re'rir betrayed him back then. So now he was conflicted on fighting him or even just putting that nigga in the dirt, for real. He was conflicted now because now he understood what happened. So of course he has to move according to that. And then he has a whole conversation with Columbina about it, fully, again, giving him a new character interaction. Because again, with Dainsleif, this was something that was really interesting in the 6.1 story with Dainsleif, is that he was interacting with other people that, mind you, under normal circumstances, he would never have interacted with, because he doesn't like having interactions with people who are of the Seven Nations like that. He really doesn't. He preferred to keep to himself and by himself and remain a mystery that just goes in and out of places, right? But in the 6.1 story, he was active and present and was willing to work with people and even divulge information that usually he wouldn't share with others, especially of the Seven Nations, about Khaenri'ah and about his relationship with the Five Sinners and who the Five Sinners are and so on and so forth.
And a much more,
which was a development of his character, if you ask me.
Human character that you might have first imagined. But let me ask you a question. When you look at Dainsleif, do you see someone relatable? Do you see someone you connect with on a personal level? And even more than that, do you see someone through whom you can feel all that pain, that tragedy, that history of loss? Or do you...
Yes. Now, relating to him one-to-one, of course not. But there's aspects of his character that you can relate to. Everyone can relate to being betrayed. Can you understand his feelings for why it is that he feels the way that he feels towards his brother and of course the other Five Sinners? Absolutely. Who wouldn't want to spin they block? But again, these same questions he's asking about Dainsleif can be applied to Avidius. Because I'm gonna be honest with y'all, for Avidius, I thought he was a cool character, but like I wasn't crying tears over this nigga. I was like, I mean, cool, bro. I mean, I fuck with what you're putting down. I get what you're getting down at. I love the whole self-sacrifice stuff. I do. I really do. I find it as a very endearing trait of an individual. That's why I love seeing it in story quests or just in characters. But like, I'd be lying to myself if I was so emotionally invested in his character that I was crying tears. Like, God forbid, no.
Or do you see someone whose entire purpose in this story is simply to drive the plot?
If someone only views Dainsleif as a plot device to drive the plot forward, you can argue about a whole bunch of shit that just exists for the sake of driving the plot forward. But we know that's not the only role that Dainsleif plays in the story. You'd have to be extremely ignorant to make that claim.
The story of Khaenri'ah tells us that due to their transgressions, the people of Khaenri'ah were cursed. Some were given the curse of the wilderness, while others were burdened with the curse of immortality. And because of that curse, the people of Khaenri'ah developed a deep disdain, a pure burning hatred towards the gods. Because that curse did not just change their lives, it shattered them. It created deep pain and deep heartache for everyone who lived through it. Now when it comes to Dainsleif quest, yes, I've gotten the exposition. I've heard everything that happened in Khaenri'ah, about its fall, about its suffering, about everything that transpired. But through Dainsleif himself, I don't think I've felt nearly enough of that tragedy. I don't think I felt enough of that pain, of that sorrow, of that heartache that I would expect from someone who represents Khaenri'ah. Dainsleif should be the embodiment, the purest representation of everything surrounding Khaenri'ah. All its pain, all its beauty, all its tragedy, and yet, I have never really felt that through him. And when you really think about it, what is crazy is that most other Khaenri'ahs we've come across in this game have done a significantly better job at depicting this tragedy than Dainsleif himself. The curse of the...
Because Dainsleif was only supposed to be meant to be as one aspect of it all. Duh. What? And not only that, let's be honest, Dainsleif, the way he paints the how the nation of Khaenri'ah fell, the way how he painted it for the longest time was that, especially when it involved the five sinners, he painted it as the five sinners did not come and help when Khaenri'ah was falling and collapsing things to the abyss, right? But from what we got from the story quest from version 6.1, aka Act 3, it showed us that the cataclysm didn't even happen yet. It was like the moment they took in abyssal power, this world-shattering power, that's when they left. The abyss hadn't even attacked yet. So or it hadn't even gone crazy yet. So from Avidius, or not Avidius, from Dainsleif's point of view, he always had this narrow view of it, which didn't leave any room for nuance, which is why when it came down to Re'rir and him learning more about Re'rir, he didn't just jump the gun and say, F that nigga, I'm gonna kill him. He was like, oh, now that I understand Re'rir better as an individual, can I really truly say that I was his friend or that we were friends and whatnot? And shit along those lines. And not only that, for the longest time, again, Dainsleif was our only mouthpiece about Khaenri'ah. The closest thing to second best was Lumine, but even for Lumine was gone for most of the time of the story. She was gone most of the time. Dainsleif was always present. And then when we got the NPC from Khaenri'ah, who because he's about to mention that NPC next. Also, why the hell he spelled Dainsleif's name with an E? I'm pretty sure Dainsleif's name is spelled Dainsleif. I don't know why there's an E in there. Like, okay, somebody clearly I don't know who edits his videos, but someone clearly effed up. Because how the hell you put this here, DEI Dainsleif, and then you got DAI. This is DEI. This is DAI. Like, how the hell you messed that up? But anyway. But yeah, again, it wasn't until later that we get different characters to give us different perspectives or viewpoints on Khaenri'ah and how they lived in Khaenri'ah. Of course, Dainsleif was the first, Lumine technically second. Then after that, we had Clotar Albric. Then after Clotar Albric, we had who? Deardith. And then after Deardith, we had this character called Ska something, who was a friend and rival of Sertology, who we met in Skirk's story quest. So I don't know if he's going to mention that character yet. So let's keep going.
Of the wilderness, for instance, we saw that depicted through Khaenri'ah and Derideth, and their stories were tragic. The kind of tragedy that stays with you, the kind that you don't just forget after the cutscene ends. And then the curse of immortality, which we saw embodied through Capitano. Someone the curse has disfigured so badly that he hides his face beneath a mask, just so no one can see what he's become underneath. And even that burning hatred towards the gods, we saw it in Clothar Alberic, someone who wasted no time showing us his absolute disdain for the divine. His words, his tone, everything about him screamed resentment.
Ooh, I think there's something else that I don't think he's going to mention, is that Dainsleif, he's reached this point in his life where he's not, like, he's even stated it in the, what was it? I think it was the second Archon quest, or second quest, Dainsleif quest we got in the entire game, where Dainsleif mentions how, oh, I have my feelings towards the gods and whatnot, but simultaneously, I know better than to sit here and seek revenge and retribution against them. So I think he's gotten to this point of contempt with his life, with everything that has happened, which is why you don't get that emotional rage of anger that he has towards the gods or towards, like, the abyss, I think. I can't remember which was the other side of it. But, like, yeah, actually, hopefully I can I'll be able to pull up pull up the scene so you can see for yourself. I'll probably do it actually right now. Let's see if I can do it right now. Let's see. Genshin. Oh, wrong one. Hold on. I gotta do this fast. Genshin Impact Dainsleif Quest. Let's see if I can find it. Not Kari Bear. I think. No, not this one. That's meeting Dainsleif. Capitano talks about Khaenri'ah and Dainsleif. They can't leave. That's not it. Not this one. Which is this one? Not this one. Actually, it was that quest. I can't remember the name of that quest though. let's go back in time to like version 1.0 Dainsleif quest. Because we got 2 of them back in version 1.0 actually. That's the crazy thing. We got 2 quests. 1.3. There we go. Sorry I'm doing all this. I just got to get my point across.
Hello everyone, and welcome back.
Oh my goodness, I'm not trying to hear all that. Can someone... Okay, hold up. Let's do story quest. Because I'm trying to get that scene, but for the love of God, I hate it when I can't find what I'm looking for. This is meeting Dainsleif. I'm not trying to find meeting Dainsleif. For the love of God, can someone not get... Oh, that spoils about some other shit. For the love of God, where is it? Okay, so it has to have been version 1.4? Bro, I swear to God, it's giving me everything but things I'm looking for. I hate that. You think that this shit would filter properly. Oh, okay, we will be reunited. There you go. I forgot the name of the quest. Let's see. Okay. Hopefully this is it and that there's no interruptions. Okay, thank God there's no interruptions. There's no one talking actually. Okay, let's see. We went to here. I want to find the point when we went to the forest area, because that's when he goes on his spiel about how he currently feels.
Ooh, there sure are a lot of enemies around here.
The closer we get to the target, the more enemies there are. Fits the Abyss Order's style.
Okay, let's play through this.
Let's go.
I'm not going any further.
Huh? Why not? Is it because you're afraid of fluffy animals?
I'll make sure to link this content
It
creator.
has nothing to do with wolves. It's because Boreas was an ancient god, yet he willingly became a servant of the Seven. I cannot possibly agree with his actions. I don't desire any interaction with him. Besides, you're the one people like. I'm less likable. There's nothing special about gods anyway. It's just my opinion, but a word of advice. Always be on your guard when around gods. You shouldn't place too much trust in them. But at the same time, don't go too far in the opposite direction. Don't go trying to overthrow them or hunt them down, even if the god in question is your sworn enemy.
Don't trust them and don't hunt them. That's some...
Lest I repeat the failings of my forebears, I will tell you one final fact.
Huh? What fact?
The destruction of the nation of Khaenri'ah by the gods is the reason the Abyss Order now seeks to destroy the nations watched over by the Seven.
Yeah, so from that scene alone, you get a taste of why it is we don't get like ultra emotional reactions from Dainsleif when it comes down to the gods, or, you know, trying to hunt them down for what happened with Khaenri'ah. Because the gods did play a role in Khaenri'ah's destruction as well, seeing as the gods are the ones who put the curse of immortality on the citizens of Khaenri'ah, both pure blood and half breed. Right? So you would expect that he had such an emotional reaction when he sees a god and starts going crazy, be like, the gods, like go act like a dog, right? Feral. But he doesn't have that reaction because that's not how he wants to move. That's not how he wants to go about doing shit, right? You think that after what happened to Khaenri'ah, he would have this, but no, that's not how he feels. So he feels completely opposite of it. He doesn't want to go down that path because we see the outcome of that path when it came down to Lumine trying to overthrow the Seven, because that's what she's trying to do. And then with Clotar Albrecht, he went the other route of pitting his faith in a being that he perceived to be a god, which wasn't a god. But because of the fact that Vetifornir, the visionary, became a transcendent being, he now would technically qualify as being a god because he transcended. He can perceive fate. He blessed Clotar Albrecht with something, and somehow, some way, Clotar Albrecht found a way to remove the curse of immortality and finally die. Right? So that's the reason why you don't see such emotional reaction from Dainsleif, because Dainsleif has reached a point of, I guess, content with everything. Like, he fully accepts the fall of Khaenri'ah and whatnot, which is why he's not so eager to try to let Lumine bring back the homeland. He's not eager in doing so. He misses home. He sure does. Better believe. But like, Khaenri'ah had its time. It met its end. It is what it is. That's where he is right now as a character. Now let's get back to the video.
Resentments and loss. Every other Khaenri'ah we've met in this world has shown us pieces of that tragedy in ways that feel real. But the one person we've traveled with the longest, the one person whose story we've been following for nearly 5 years, it feels different. It feels like...
But Dainsleif has extreme emotional reaction when it comes down to the 5 sinners, which is why he said he was going to spin the block and get vengeance on them, even his brother, the visionary Vetifornir. Because, again, he stands on his business about the fact that y'all betrayed me. And on top of that, y'all didn't even come help Khaenri'ah when the abyss was overflowing everywhere and the gods came and clapped the nation.
Feels like his entire role has been to make these stories happen, rather than to be a living embodiment of what Khaenri'ah truly represents. See, when it's all said, the topic of Avidius versus Dainsleif, more than anything, highlights Genshin Impact's fundamental storytelling flaws. Like I said earlier, Dainsleif was given every chance to be better. His story had been told over a much longer period of time than Avidius's. The core of his story is also far more interesting, and on top of that, he's a much more relevant character within his own game. But unfortunately, as we've seen time and time again with Genshin Impact, characters with so much potential and narrative advantage still somehow end up falling short. In contrast, the writers of Wooden Wave did a phenomenal job with Avidius, crafting a
bullshit. Absolute bullshit. Hold up, let's go back.
Pain and deep heartache for everyone who lived through it. Now, when it comes to Dainsleif Quest, yes, I've gotten the exposition. I've heard everything that happened in Khaenri'ah, about its fall, about its suffering, about everything that transpired. But through Dainsleif himself, I don't think I felt nearly enough of that tragedy. I don't think I felt enough of that pain, of that sorrow, of that heartache that I would expect from someone who represents Khaenri'ah. Dainsleif should be the embodiment, the purest representation of everything surrounding Khaenri'ah.
Again, Dainsleif's pain and heartache, it doesn't really come from the fact that Khaenri'ah fell as a nation. It comes from the fact that, again, his personal beef with the 5 sinners who betrayed him. That's where all his emotion is at. It's not at where the fact that Khaenri'ah fell as a nation or that he lost his home, right? We know this. So, again, like I said, that's why we don't see him have such grand emotional reaction when it comes down to him talking about Khaenri'ah as a nation, right? But when it comes down to the failings of the nation and the betrayal he faced, yeah, he has more emotion when he's talking about those two topics. Delving in the abyss and the freaking 5 sinners taking their own fair share of world-shattering power.
All its pain, all its beauty, all its tragedy, and yet, I have never really felt that through him. And when you really think about it, what is crazy is that
this goes back to, as he said, I've never felt that through them. But I would argue that we did get that. Especially with the 6.1 story in particular. Yeah. Especially playing it from the perspective of one of the 5 sinners who betrayed Dainsleif. He's even more justified for trying to smoke out these niggas. Or if not, spin the block on them. He's so much more justified. Especially when you play through it and you're like, bro, y'all niggas really did this man dirty.
Other Khaenri'ahs we've come across in this game has done a significantly better job at depicting this tragedy than Dainsleif himself. The Curse of the Wilderness, for instance. We saw that...
And the reason I would argue for why that is because, again, like I said, Dainsleif is in the position that he is now, and he feels the way he feels. Therefore, that's why he's not so ultimately having such an emotional reaction to it. When it came down to Coulter Albrecht, like, he was like, man, I lost my standing of riches, but I also lost the love of my life. And, of course, my illegitimate son. And then when it came down to Deirdre, she didn't lose anything yet, actually. Deirdre hadn't lost anything. The only thing Deirdre was obsessed with was trying to find a savior to save Khaenri'ah when shit was going down. So she didn't have such an emotional reaction to the loss of her nation because her nation had not been lost yet in that moment where we was interacting with her.
Saw that depicted through Khaenri'ah and Derrida, and their stories were tragic. The kind of tragedy that stays.
Oh, he's a Khaenri'ah. Well, Coulter Albrecht and Khaenri'ah, they're tied together. So, and for Khaenri'ah's story, he was a child who got turned into a Hilichurl, and then he was used as a core part of the the Loom of Fate, which then was then connected to another part of it, which then led to the creation of the Atlas, which then will be used to bring the nation of Khaenri'ah back. We don't know where, but we know that that's what they plan to do. Khaenri'ah's story was sad because he was a victim of it. Deirdre's story was sad not because she was a victim of it, but we know that she will soon become a victim of it and be turned into a Hilichurl, which would show that she was half Khaenri'ah. Same thing with Khaenri'ah. The emotion Dainsleif felt again was his betrayal, him being betrayed, not the fact that Khaenri'ah as a nation fell. Lumine, her personal emotional attachment to Khaenri'ah was the fact that the nation fell, but also she had spent so much time in that nation to the point that she viewed the people of Khaenri'ah as her people that she loved and cared for, which is why she's emotionally invested and attached to it. So, like, all these characters that's tied to Khaenri'ah in some type of way, they all have their own piece of the pie of why they're emotionally attached to it, whether it be the nation or the people of the nation. And Dainsleif clearly checks that box off.
Stays with you, the kind that you don't just forget after the cutscene ends. And then the curse of immortality, which we saw embodied through Capitano. Someone the curse has disfigured so badly that he hides his face beneath a mask, just so no one can see.
And I would argue for Capitano, his character didn't have enough time to be fleshed out enough, which is one of the criticisms that people give of Natlan's Archon Quest, is that a character like the Captain didn't get fleshed out enough for us to, like, justify him being sacrificed at the end, which they should have done better. They should have fleshed his character out more. Also, I'm pretty sure we were told that his face became the way that it is, which is why he wears a mask. Not shown how it happened. But it is what it is.
See what he's become underneath. And even that burning hatred towards the gods, we saw it in Coulter Albrecht, someone who wasted no time showing us his.
But, you know, Coulter Albrecht wasn't the only one who had hatred towards the gods. Everyone from Khaenri'ah, especially if you are a pure blood Khaenri'ah, has hatred towards the gods, both before and after the Cataclysm.
Absolute disdain for the divine. His words, his tone, everything about him screamed resentment and loss. Every other Khaenri'ah we've met in this world has shown us pieces of that tragedy in ways that feel real. But the one person we've traveled with the longest, the one person whose story we've been following for nearly 5 years, it feels different. It feels like his entire role has been to make these stories happen, rather than.
It's very interesting how he's saying all these things, but he's not talking about the one thing that, again, that I've been repeating for the last freaking couple minutes now, that is the very thing Dainsleif has a direct emotional connection to, which is a human emotion, mind you, that everyone who lives and breathes on this planet Earth has felt before, which is betrayal. That is the emotional attachment and human emotion that is attached to Dainsleif, being betrayed. That's what it is. It's crazy to me how he's checking off the boxes for all these other characters for what their emotional attachment to the story was, or that was connected to them because of the story. But he's not doing the same thing for Dainsleif, which is pretty freaking blatant which is so blatantly obvious. And it's like, huh? Maybe I'm misunderstanding. See, someone could tell me in the comment section.
rather than to be a living embodiment of what Khaenri'ah truly represents. See, when it's all said, the topic of Avidius versus Dainsleif, more than anything, highlights Genshin Impact's fundamental storytelling flaws. Like I said earlier, Dainsleif was given every chance to be.
I disagree that it highlights Genshin's storytelling flaws. I think what it really highlights for this whole conversation is that recency bias is playing fucking hardcore defense and gameplay right now. That niggas are looking at Dainsleif and being like, oh, well, his character doesn't get fleshed out enough. And it's like, no, his character got fleshed out plenty. It's just, there won't be a story quest that exists until later, technically, that we'll get a full deep dive into his character. Granted, we already got enough information about his character, so his character doesn't even need a deep dive. We know everything. We know that homeboy was betrayed not only by the Five Sinners, but also by Lumine as well. So we know this information. We know all this information. Spoken from the words of his own mouth and from his interactions with the Five Sinners before they betrayed him, and his interaction with Lumine before she eventually betrayed him. So it's like, I feel like his character has been fleshed out perfectly and enough for us to fully picture and understand his character at this point. And again, like I said, recency bias is also playing hardcore gameplay right now. So there's that. So I would disagree that this showed one of Genshin's greatest storytelling flaws. I think just recency bias is really playing hardcore. That's all. And that people are wanting to compare just for the sake of comparing. To say, Wu are better, Hoyo bad, Hoyo the devil, Coral Games is God. But anyway.
To be better. His story had been told over a much longer period of time than Avidius's. The core of his story is also far more interesting, and on top of that, he's a much more relevant character within his own game. But unfortunately, as we've seen time and time again with Genshin Impact, characters with so much potential and narrative advantage still somehow end up falling short. In contrast, the writers of Wooden Wave did a phenomenal.
And could you provide those characters, please? Because Dainsleif is not one of those characters. He doesn't fall off narratively at all.
No job with Avidius. Crafting a character who feels more relatable, more grounded, more emotionally compelling.
A character who feels more relatable. Again, Avidius does not feel relatable. The only thing that's relatable about Avidius is the idea of trying to defy fate. But even then, most people in this world do not experience that. For example, if someone has cancer versus someone who doesn't have cancer, guess what? That person who has cancer is going to be more than willing to try to defy their fate of letting this thing kill them, versus the average everyday Joe who's not experiencing that at all and just living life, just going through the motions. So I think a very small minority of people will understand Avidius or get behind him when it comes down to this whole defying fate. A very small percentage of people will be able to grasp that fully and truly, versus the mass majority of people on this planet.
And ultimately more memorable. But now I want to hear what you
saying that Avidius is more memorable is crazy. It was kind of crazy. Like, now, saying Avidius is memorable. Okay, let me retract my statement. Yes, he is more memorable. But as this story continues, this grand story thing, he's going to be forgotten and thrown to the wayside. Whereas all the cool ore farming, cool moments will be reserved for the rover moving forward. Because let's be fucking for real. The Wuthering Waves player base only wants their main character to be doing cool shit. No one else. This male character, NPC, having a cool moment, God forbid. Shoot. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't get another moment like this ever again. I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. Especially with the core player bases. But,
what you think. What do you make of the entire arguments between Avidius and things?
I feel like the argument, I don't say everything I need to say. I don't think I need to repeat myself for the fucking 10th fucking time. I think I've done spent enough time doing this reaction alone. I think this is an hour-long reaction. So, yeah, I think we're going to end it here. Like, sub, turn on notification bell, join my YouTube community Discord if you want. I'll leave a link to this consecrate, to the Nigerian perspective in his video, and of course the other consecrator that I pulled up on my stream, or not stream, reaction, to show the clip that I wanted to show. Overall, I think I gave my opinion. I don't think I need to restate myself because I'm tired and I don't want to restate my opinion. But y'all get my opinion at this point. Refute my opinion if you wish in the comment section below, and we'll move on from there. See you later. Good night and peace. This is KallaTheYapper signing out.